Most professional shooters agree that besides structured live training, nothing improves your shooting more than dry fire. So why don't everybody do it? Well, it's pretty much the most boring thing that you can do with a gun. I've tried almost every gadget out there that promises to make dry fire more effective or even fun. Some I still use weekly after years, and others, well, they've joined the drawer of forgotten gear. So today I'll share my hard-earned and honestly pretty costly experience on what are the things that you most likely will end up using in the long run, and what that will actually have a positive impact on your skills versus the ones that will soon be ending up in that famous drawer. Oh, and if you enjoy this content, please subscribe. I don't post very often, but when I do, I do try to make quality videos about entertaining or interesting topics related to shooting. So let's get started with the very basic gear related to dry fire and cover how even small, simple, cost-efficient tools can have a big impact on your shooting. First off, you obviously need a rifle, a pistol, and a holster. When it comes to what you aim at, you can use whatever around, like light switches, bottle caps, plants, but you will get more value with minimal cost if you step it up a little bit. So use real targets, the same ones that you shoot at on the range or at the match, and since dry fire usually happens at shorter distances, go smaller, mini or even micro IPSC targets. Double Alpha, which is a brand I use a lot, actually sell great dry fire targets in a kind of like durable wood-like material for under $20. And they also have the same for USPSA versions. A small but super useful tip, get some adhesive putty. In Norway we call it teacher's gum, but I definitely not recommend it as gum. You'll find it at most office supply stores, and this makes it so much simpler just to hang your targets around, as it sticks to your targets anywhere, it doesn't leave a mark, and you can basically reuse it for forever. Now, Double Alpha makes a ton of clever dry fire gear. I once bought their swinger targets, which is basically something you just mount a window or a mirror, and it moves when you just pull a string. I think it's a fun idea, but honestly, mine ended up in the drawer pretty fast, because I'll show you some better ways to train on moving targets later in the video. What I do recommend from them, though, are these dry fire magazines. And yes, I know what you're thinking, but I already have magazines. Well, here are 4 reasons why you should get these. 1, they're safe, so you can't load any real ammunition in them. 2, they're weighted, so your draw and your reloads feels more realistic. 3, unlike empty real mags, they don't lock the slide back when they're empty, so you can rack your slide or pull your charge handle freely. And 4, they're cheap. I mean, they're starting at around $20. Now, about those moving targets I mentioned. My favorite setup is using my TV, or basically any screen. There are tons of YouTube videos with real or animated moving targets that you can dry fire at. The one that I've used for years is Dryfireking. They make great animated drills with an "Are you ready" command, a start beat, and even a part time. Oh, and if you don't know what part time is, I'll cover that soon. Each session runs about 10 to 15 minutes, and it includes several different stages with or without moving targets. And I just cast it from my iPhone to an Apple TV, but any setup that allows you to view YouTube videos on a screen would technically work. One thing that I do want to call out is that I treat their drills as suggestions, so you don't need to follow them exactly. What I like to do is that I often mix things up with placing my own target with the teacher's gum around the room, and I do create the stages that fit whatever I want to practice. They have a Patreon subscription for about $5 a month that gives you access to the full library, and in my opinion, that's totally worth it, as it's one of those things that I've kept using over time. But try the free videos out first, and if you like them, you can support the creators. One thing that I'd say is a non-negotiable if you want to get better at shooting, both at the range and at home, is a timer. I always try to train with one because if you can't measure progress, you technically can't improve it. Once you have a timer, learn how to actually use it. Since nothing goes boom during dry fire, well, at least hopefully, the timer can't register your last shot. And this is where the part time comes in. So part time means the timer gives you 1 beep to start, like we're used to, and another when the set time is up. So let's say you set a part time of 3 seconds. If you consistently finish just before the second beep, great, you're hitting your goal. Then start shaving it down to push yourself. That is one of the important ways on how you track improvement when you're dry firing. The timer I use, and the one that I recommend, is the SG Timer 2. I mean, it nails the basic, but it also has a ton of different advanced features if you want them. You can do stuff like you can preload drills, you can control it from your phone or even your Apple Watch, you can film with the timer overlay, and you can even score straight into practice score or shoot and score it. There are 2 versions of this timer. You have the SG Timer 2, which you see here, and you also have the SG Timer Go. I personally own both, but I keep coming back to the 2. The Go has a nice angle display that I like because it's easy to read from your belt, but it only has 2 buttons, and you consistently have to go into the app to change settings, which is why I usually recommend the Timer 2 for most people. Now, these timers are not cheap. The Timer 2 is around $330, with the Go being a slightly less cost, but honestly, a good timer for a shooter is like a good knife for a chef. You don't need the best one, but I think it's worth investing in something solid.
Ooh, the predilection. Okay.
Now, before I get to what I think is the ultimate Dryfire tool, a quick warning about a few gadgets that I did spend some money on, but soon ended up in that drawer. First up, the MantisX. This is a small Bluetooth device that you attach to your pistol or rifle. It tracks the weapon movement before, during, and after the trigger pull, and then sends that data back to an app that gives you insights and corrective tips. If you keep shooting low left, as an example, it will help you find the cause and what to work on. I love this little thing for the first couple of weeks, both in Dryfire at the range. Then it went into the drawer. It basically stayed there since. I don't think I actually used it for a couple of years. Now, this doesn't mean it's bad. I mean, it's great for pinpointing errors, and I recommend it for instructors, club, ranges, or just to have on hand. But for an individual shooter at about $250, which is a little bit pricey, I suspect that you're only going to be using them a few times. So if you want to try it, try to borrow one first, because chances are that the owner isn't using it much anyway. Another product that a lot of companies sells are these laser bullets. This is basically dummy cartridges that you just drop in the barrel, and then when the firing pin hits them, they send a laser out the muzzle. So, why bother? Well, alone they add very little value, and the real value actually comes when you pair them up with other gear. For example, you can hang special targets on a wall, and you can run an app that uses your phone's camera to register the laser impact, which allows you to run different drills, and you get the scoring and the feedback directly on the app. You can also buy different electronic targets like these that activate when you hit them with the laser, and it actually works pretty well. So I did have a lot of fun with this at first, but then the rigging, the need to reset or rack the slide for every shot, and the hassle of setting everything up in between, it meant that it soon ended up in that drawer, and I haven't honestly used mine for years now. The last Mantis product I bought is for the AR-15, and this is the Blackbeard X. So you swap out the bolt carrier group for this plastic unit, and then the magazine is a rechargeable battery. And this does 2 things. First, it fires a laser out the barrel, and second, it automatically resets the trigger after every pull. That automatic reset is a big deal, because that means that you get a fresh trigger pull each time, and not just the first one after you racked, followed by a bunch of dead pulls until you rack the charging handle again. That both improves the actual training, and it also makes the laser much more useful for realistic practice. I think this is a solid tool with a clear use case. I don't use the laser all the time, and sometimes I even tape over the muzzle because it can be a little bit distracting when I already have a red dot. It's handy for close range holdover practice, and I like that you get proper trigger break every shot. But I do find that it can struggle a little bit on very fast splits. So it's a good product, but it's not the perfect product. So this is a product that I do use occasionally, especially when I do the Dryfireking exercises on the TVs, but at about $320, I think it's something that you need to think twice about before you end up buying. The final product that I'll mention before moving on to what I think is the ultimate Dryfire tool is a product I have actually not bought. So keep that in mind when I do this review. It's one of the rare occasions where I managed to apply a little bit of logic and critical thinking before pulling the trigger, pun intended, on a product I think seems exciting. This product is from a company called CoolFire, and it basically replaces your barrel with a CO2 gas cylinder. The gas cylinder cycles a slide to reset the trigger, and it gives a recoil impulse. And this is one of the key things that they advertise with real recoil, they say. And my point is that it's not real recoil. I mean, as in the same way that you will get with real ammunition. It's just recoil impulse. And it will be different than the one that you would get with shooting real ammunition. Like laser bullets, you can add a laser to see the impacts, and you do train with your actual gun, which is a big plus in my opinion. The real advantage is the automatic trigger reset, which is pretty useful. Still, the practical downsides are real. I mean, these kits are model specific to each gun model. You need to refill the CO2 every 10 to 20 rounds, depending on the cylinder. And I'm reading that user reports on fiddliness related to various things like the temperature of the CO2. And then there's the price package, starting at around $400, and it can go all the way up to $1,000 plus shipping and tax. And for that money and hassle, I suspect many people would see it as another expensive gadget that would end up in this drawer. Recently, they also came out with this AR-15 version, but given everything I just said, I would probably just pick the Mantis Blackbeard over this, even without the recoil impulse. And that brings me to the product that I keep on coming back to, several times a week, almost 2 years after I first bought it. I must admit though, that the first time I heard about a virtual reality trainer, I technically just wrote it off as a novelty. I mean, a stupid game that will add zero value to my training, as the actual usage would not be transferable to my shooting. It was first when I talked with some really good shooters that said that they used it regularly and that they had seen a positive impact on their shooting that it started to spark my interest. Eventually, for a couple of years ago since then, I ended up buying it and I've never looked back. I'll cover in detail what you need in order to use it, but first let me explain what this is all about. The ACEXR simulator is a virtual reality training system that aims at improving your shooting skills. It has more than 100 different drills and stages that covers different skill building elements like draws, transitions, sight focus, to full-on competition stages within IPSC, USPSA, steel challenge, or even home defense. It gives you real-time feedback and metrics on shots, splits, accuracy, transition, performance tracking, and you have a full selection of customizable virtual firearms and optics to them from real-world manufacturers. You also have multiplayer community features and online leaderboards, together with events that they do run from time to time. Now, what I think sets ACEXR apart is that it's a complete training package. It's not just a game. It's updated often, and top shooters help shape the content. And honestly, in my view, it's probably the best option on the market by a mile. Sometimes I realize that it's so immersive that I sometimes forget that I'm actually in my living room and not at the range. Inside ACEXR, there are 3 main types of training. You have the trills, the drills, and the skills. Drills is probably the most gamified part, and this is where you just have fun, basically. You can shoot at zombies, drone, you can even play a whack-a-mole, and you can also jump into virtual ranges and just throw lead, kind of like or maybe pixels they are called here, down the range. Now, the drills part is where I spend most of my time. Here you'll find hundreds of different stages, from simple setups like 1 paper target and 2 poppers, to complex stages with movements and transitions. And if you have room, you can physically just move around the room to do these stages. What you do is that during your setup, you define your boundaries, and if you get too close to the edge, you'll get a warning. And if you keep on pushing towards that edge, your camera will then fade in the real-world surroundings around you, so that the chances of bumping into something are low, but I'll promise you, they're not zero, and I am talking from experience here. You can bookmark your favorite stages, you can filter by type, or you can jump into a series. The series work a little bit more like a real match, where you have multiple stages that are scored together. At the end of each stage, you'll see your hits, your total score, and you also have leaderboards, and you will see where you place. You have a timer on your belt, and you can look down to see the time and operate the timer. And then there's the skill section, which focuses on developing specific abilities like draws, transitions, or reloads. Many people ask if it's possible to build your own stages, and right now building your own stages is still a little bit limited. So you can place a few targets on a virtual range, but the developers have said that this feature is going to expand over time. So at the range, you also have this small cozy cabin, which is kind of like your personal hub. And here you can see all your guns, or you can buy new ones. And just to be clear, there's no extra cost beyond the subscription. So when I say buy, it's virtual currency. Everything is included, and you simply just unlock it by training more. You can customize your guns here in great detail. I mean, you can swap out optics, irons, magazine, and you can even change the reticle or style of illumination on your optics. From the cabin, you can also check your friends list, you can invite others to train, you can browse all the stages and drills, you can review your performance, and you can see what to work on next. You can pick between different range environments, and when special events are live, which happens pretty often, you'll see the banners and updates about them right here. In the corner here, you have a little bookshelf to store your trophies that you get after each season, and as you shoot, you will see the empty casing start to build up in the barrels here. And this is also where you see how many shots you've fired since you started, and the potential savings connected to that. And to answer the big question, do I actually use it? The definite answer is yes. And to prove that, there's even this calendar on the wall that tracks your training. And as you see, while I don't use it daily, and I mean sometimes even weeks can go by in between session, this is a tool that I keep coming back to month after month because it's fun and it does actually improve your shooting. What I practice here transfers directly into the range. And some people will say, yeah, but it doesn't have recoil. And that is true, at least not in the traditional sense that your gun will kind of like jump in your hand, but it does simulate sight disruption so that your sight picture moves just like it would in your real life. And when I tested this against real life, the result I see is that my splits here in the VR are almost identical to the splits that I have on the range. Now, I recently shot the Nordic Steel Challenge Championship, and in the simulator you actually have all the stages that they run in Steel Challenge. When I first ran them here and then later looked at the time and the footage that you see here from the shooting that I did when I shot the actual match, my time was pretty much exactly the same in real life as I had here in the simulator. So what's the damage to my wallet, you ask? Well, let's break it down into what you need versus what is nice. Now, you need 3 things to run ACEXR. First, you need a MetaQuest VR headset. Any MetaQuest will work, but I recommend the MetaQuest 3, which is the most powerful one, and this comes in different storage sizes, so if you only plan to use ACEXR, 128GB is fine, though new units often ship with 512. If you're on a budget, check the second-hand market first, because a lot of people sell theirs once the novelty wears off. Not necessarily for ACEXR, but for different types of VR stuff. Second, you need the ACEXR gun. This is basically just a shell that holds the controller. Pick the model that matches the gun that you actually shoot with. They have quite nice quality and they're weighted to feel realistic. And you must buy the ACEXR gun first to get the trigger module. Then you can swap that module between the shells later. The gun with the trigger control cost about $199. Third and lastly on the list of things you actually do need is the ACEXR subscription. Now, this is a monthly subscription for $19 or $14 per month if you pay annually. If you use the code Tony Renstrom, which is down below, you will get a 10% discount on the gun and your first payment. So that's what you need at the minimum. Headset, gun, subscription. Everything else, and the things that I'm going to mention now, are optional add-ons. Now, the other things that you might consider to add are a better head strap. The original one is a pretty flimsy one and can be a pain to play with over time. The one that I use is one called boboVR head strap, and it's a really nice adjustable fit, and it also comes with a rechargeable battery for when you want to train for longer. I'd also recommend to get a holster that fits the gun. It might be that your standard holster will fit, and if not, you can buy a holster directly from ACEXR that will fit the gun to your order. Also, if you use glasses, these will, depending on the glasses, typically fit within the frame of the headset, but it's not super comfortable to use for over periods of time. So you can also get these custom lenses that are made specifically for you that you just snap on the inside, and these typically start for about $50. So how about this rifle, you say? Well, as of now, ACEXR actually does not support a rifle. But I saw you're shooting one, you say, and that's correct, because you can 3D print a rifle that will fit the controller that is used in the game. It does take a little bit of effort, and it's a long list of parts that you can buy, but you can also buy it pre-assembled. I ended up buying my rifle from a company called 71 Creative for about $186. And I then get the upper and lower that accepts a normal AR-15 mil-spec handguard, buffer tube, and buttstock. And that's also what I ended up buying, because this gives me the most realistic feel and weight. But if you want the part 3D printed and delivered with weights, you can expect about $316 plus shipping and tax. Now, in the simulator, you still see a virtual gun, which is obviously not a rifle, but I barely noticed it because I'm looking through the optics, and one of the optics that I have available is the Holosun 510, which is similar to what I run on my PCC and rifle. The only issue I had was that the optics sits a little bit high in the simulator compared with my usual low 1/3 mount. I fixed that with buying a buttstock that has an adjustable cheek rise, and I do want to give a heads up, literally, that this stock can sometimes hit the bottom of the headset, but raising the headset up a little bit usually solves that. The rifle also accepts standard Glock magazines, so you can basically pair it with one of the weighted ones that I mentioned previously, and that will then increase the weight to be even heavier and more like a real rifle. So hopefully you found all of that helpful in trying to avoid spending hard-earned money on things that will end up not being used. And if you did find it useful, I would be super grateful for a like and subscribe, and I promise to do my best to create some in-depth content related to the world of shooting. So thanks for watching.